From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Suspected serial killer Benjamin Franklin once famously wrote, "In this world, nothing is certain except for death and taxes." And it's such an interesting thought exercise to imagine what he, or truly anybody from the 1700s, would think about the modern day. Like in Benji Frank's example, I personally think the guy would have loved Twitter and probably Tinder too. Probably like things even more specific than Tinder, you know.
He might have gone Grindr occasionally, you know. I think
see
he was an equal opportunity romantic.
Yeah.
I can imagine him adding an addendum just for the purposes of this episode to be like, and glass jars. Or, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's because it's easy for us to imagine what someone from the 1700s would find impressive in the modern day. You know, things like airplanes or electric lights or space shuttles, or the fact that some people can survive diseases that used to be a death sentence. But it's also easy to forget the commonplace stuff that would absolutely like destroy their brain for a few days. And one of those big things is plastic. We live in the age of plastic. It's all around us. If he was confronted with this, Ben Franklin might have to revise that quote and say, nothing is certain other than death, taxes, and I guess plastic now. We did an episode on a real conspiracy surrounding recycling, and it's about microplastics. Please check it out. That's where you'll learn a lot of the basics of plastics history and its composition, but there's still a ton of stuff they don't want you to know about plastic. Billions of tons, actually. And today we're taking a slightly more meditative approach, and we're asking a question that many of our fellow conspiracy realists have probably thought about, which is this: what would the world be like without this stuff? Could we, as a global civilization, ever turn back the clock and live in a world without plastic? And then perhaps, is it something that we would actually want to do? Well, here are the facts. We've got a lot of numbers here, but we're going to try to make sure they're not the kind of numbers that make your eyes glaze over.
Yeah, it's because plastic is absolutely everywhere. I mean, just look around your workspace or your bedroom or your house, anywhere. I mean, right in front of my eyes is like a ring light that's made of plastic, the lens part that the light filters through, this webcam that we're broadcasting into, made of plastic. You know, all of the pieces that make up the case of my monitor, any of our monitors, plastic. Inside the guts of the thing, so many plastics. The printed circuit boards that electronics are mounted on, made of plastic, or various, types of plastic. There are obviously several categories. But the fact is, it is absolutely everywhere, and it's an incredible miracle of innovation. It's lightweight, it's easy to manufacture, you can shape it into just about anything, and it's sturdy. Ben, you point out that it's up there with, say, the wheel, or, the basic tools that we use, or things like a pulley or a lever, important innovations that allowed us to kind of step outside of our limitations as human beings.
Yeah, man.
I want to jump into the 6 basic tools real fast. I'm off the top of my head without looking at the list. Hammer. Hammer is 1. Bottle opener. It's got to be number 2.
Mm-hmm. Instant pot.
Can opener.
Yeah.
Ice pick, or some sort of stabbing tool, I imagine. Right? Maybe.
I think we're talking. I know we're not talking about those things. I'm being jokey. Sorry about that, guys.
What? Don't ever apologize for a good joke. No joke left behind. Hashtag it. Tweet it. It's true that it's easy for us to underestimate the profound impact of plastic in all its various forms and genres. I mean, I don't think, some people disagree with me, but I don't think it's exaggerating to say that in terms of importance to civilization, both positive and negative, plastic might be up there with fire. It might be up there with the time somebody figured out how to create fire.
Well, but it also begs the question, like all the things that we're describing, all of these things that I'm looking at my room and rattling off, are these things that we necessarily need? I mean, if you look back to, Bakelite, the earliest version of plastic, it was kind of designed to make sort of chintzy crap that we could be sold and convinced that we needed it. It is very much a product of like the material age, the materialistic age that we need to acquire all this stuff. And certainly the idea of computers and the plastics that are used in things like a monitor, I mean, it'd certainly be hard pressed to turn back the clock and live without those things. But, when you're talking about the basic simple machines, things like a screw or a wedge, or a plane or a pulley or whatever, these are, I think, much more necessary than plastic. But you can't really put that genie back in the bottle now, can you? Because we're used to it.
Yeah, no, not gonna. It's probably not going to happen, and that is the most optimistic way I can phrase that response. Unfortunately, the most solid reports right now estimate that there is a little north of 8.3 billions of tons of plastic on the planet. Of that 8.3 billion, 6.3 billion of those tons are straight up trash. It's garbage. No one's going to use it. No one's going to recycle it. No one's going to burn it. This is, just to give you the image in your mind, folks, this is the equivalent of like 55 million jumbo jets. And if that doesn't really bring it home, pull up a picture of Mount Everest and realize that if you stacked all this plastic up in one place, you would easily get a pile literally bigger than the tallest mountain in human experience.
There's already an insane amount of trash just on that actual mountain itself from all the would-be, Everest summiters, out there, like leaving all their droppings behind. It's become a real problem.
I get an image of that movie WALL-E with all the trash mountains that exist on the planet at that point in the future. That's what I'm seeing.
The three of us recently went to a friend of ours art studio that happens to be situated right next to what is supposedly a recycling dump, I guess, for lack of a better term. And yet it never seems to get smaller. And there's a reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. The numbers that we just named, if they're not troubling, or if they're things you've heard before and it's easy to shake off, think of it this way. This time, 5 years from now, that may well be referred to as the good old days, when only 90% of the trash in the world's ocean was some form of plastic. Right now, as we speak, every second, 160,000 plastic bags are getting used by someone somewhere. That means that each year, just every single calendar year, 5 trillion plastic bags, new ones, are made. And this leads experts to project that pound for pound, by 2050, the weight of the plastic in the oceans alone will outweigh the mass of all the fish. Not hyperbole. They'll weigh less than the trash.
Wow. And that's particularly puzzling to my mind when you imagine the weight of a plastic bag. Like, think about that.
Just picture that scene from American Beauty. That lighter than air plastic bag just wafting through the breeze. And one of the reasons that plastic bags, I think most people know that plastic bags are not recyclable. It is because in order to recycle a thing, they have to weigh enough for you to actually be able to kind of chop them up into little bits. And can you imagine trying to chase around a gazillion plastic bags in some sort of centrifuge? Like, it just wouldn't work. So plastic bags are like the least recyclable and most popular plastic item. Maybe that's not exactly accurate, but that certainly feels like it's up there. It's very troubling. Those numbers, especially considering how light they are.
Yeah, and let's twist the knife a little bit. You know what kind of show this is, folks. That's the optimistic projection, that 2050. What they're really saying is by 2050. It could happen sooner than that. And it's a shame that environmental concerns have been sort of politicized, or they've been appropriated for different people's agendas, whatever those agendas may be. But if you look at the numbers, which know no ideology, then you should be concerned. This growth is part of an accelerating pattern. In 1950, the world, the whole shebang, made about 2 million tons of plastic per year. And since then, annual production has increased 200 times, 200x. So just in 2015, for example, the world was making not 2 million tons, but 381 million tons. Just for comparison, 381 million tons is about the same weight as 2/3 of the entire human population.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, obviously, in part, this has to be a product of population growth, but not to that degree. How do you go from 2 million tons a year to 380 million tons a year, even given an explosion in population? It seems to me that it means that the production and usage of plastic has gone completely unchecked, and no one's really thinking about the future at all.
Yeah, just not for a long time they weren't, and just works so well for so many things. We'll explore this too. It should go without saying, but we have to point it out. The plastic game is not distributed equally. The biggest producers of plastic waste at least, are the wealthy countries. Just because of consumer culture, because of economic booms. I mean, if you look at the U.S. in 2021, its own agency, the EPA, reports that Americans generate 35.7 million tons of plastic in 1 year. And, as we pointed out in the microplastics episode, studies show that nowadays plastic particles might be inside your body before you're born. Like they might go through your mother and go across the barrier and get into you while you're in the womb. What long-term effects will that have? People aren't too sure. That's the scary part. And before it sounds like we're dumping on plastic, yes, it's like any other technology, at least until the day we get to AI. Plastic has no moral compass. It's just like a gun. It's just like a bop-it. Those are two very different examples. It can do wonderful and terrible things depending on how it's used.
I've definitely pictured somebody using a bop-it as a bludgeoning device.
Yeah.
It's
robbing a bank.
Kind of a menacing toy, actually, if you think about it.
It could be psychological warfare. I think some of those toys, when the kids get really into them, can probably do things to their parents' or caretakers' minds. But this is, okay, so I was thinking of an analogy. Tell me what you think of this. Plastic, in a way, is a lot like advertising. You are almost certain to be unaware of how much of it surrounds you, how much you touch on a daily basis, how much you just see passing by, how much you encounter. And if you want to be incredibly depressed or profoundly impressed, or both at the same time, take our old advertising game and apply it to plastic. Wake up, start a clock for 24 hours, and start trying to count every example of plastic you see. I don't know about you guys. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm personally so convinced that this is an impossible task that you have my word. If you can accurately count all the plastic you see over a period of 24 hours, write to us and I will send you a prize. I don't know if it's going to be fancy, but it might, because I doubt anyone can actually do this.
Will it be made of plastic?
I was
I'm
wondering.
going to win. I'm going to win this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go camping and I'm going to stay in my tent for 24 hours. And I'm just going to go, tent.
Right.
Way to game the system, Matt. You're definitely going to get a decoder ring from Ben in the mail.
Decoder ring, yes. It is really tough, and it has a lot in common with advertising. And there's, to be fair, if we look at the pros and cons, plastic has helped people accomplish so many things. It's saved countless lives in the field of medicine. It's helped humans reach space. That would not have happened. But there's also no question that plastic is universally causing profound harm to just about everything, human or not, on the planet. except for the bank accounts of several very powerful corporations. They're making out like gangbusters. Places like SABIC, the Saudi Arabia Basic Industries Corporation, money hand over fist. They're the largest single manufacturer of plastic, but most of the other, like the Captain Planet villain types are also in on the game. Dow, ExxonMobil, all the hits, all the good ones. And we know that it's, despite the statements that you see from international organizations and NGOs and even these companies themselves, we know the pattern is set to accelerate even further. We're looking at a J-curve here. This is exponential growth.
Yeah, it is. So if we look at 2016 and we look at the global plastic market size, okay, so 2016, it was 502 billion US dollars. And then 4 years later in 2020, it was $579.7 billion. So that's a nice little jump in the billions. But here's the deal. This global plastic market will likely increase to $750 billion, or a little bit more actually, by 2028. And that's insane.
Yeah. Eighth largest industry in the U.S., the world's richest country. And every day, around 1 million people in the U.S. alone wake up and they work on plastic. They're not bad people at all. It's their job. In fact, they're some of the smartest people around. This argument about what to do, this dilemma, is often bogged down in politics, ideological tribalism. You might have someone who's more on the conservative side saying like, these, it's an outdated phrase, but like, these tree-hugging hippies are choosing, obscure amphibians over actual human beings who need this job to survive. But that's so misleading. When it comes to plastics, civilization, us making the show, you listening, everybody is in a crabs in a bucket scenario. I mean, this is the same species that can't stop killing itself over things like religion or resources or inane disagreements over the dumbest things. Like this is a species that has gone to war over one guy's ear. It's a true story. It's called The War of Jenkins' Ear. You can check it out on Ridiculous History, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Always be closing. So, but
you get the coffee. You get the coffee.
But there's not really, if you look at it realistically, as terrifying as it may be to admit, there's no plausible chance of this species cooperating long enough to right the ship of humanity before it sinks irrevocably into the deep waters of extinction. But what if somehow people did manage to walk back from the precipice? What would the world actually look like without plastic? We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors. Maybe we can come back and count some of the plastic stuff we found, but we'll see when we return.